how's it going, everyone? Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Music Reviewer Podcast. My name's Josh. Today, I'm reviewing for you guys Re-Animator by the band Everything Everything. Today's going to be episode 30 of the podcast album review series. I'm pretty excited to review this album. This honestly has been the most excited I've been to review or listen to a project, I think, since the beginning of this podcast started, which was now a few months ago with the New Abnormal, the Strokes' new album, because I guess I am somewhat of a fan. I am a pretty avid listener of Everything. And just before we get started, I want to let everyone know, check out the latest episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week that's up, that I put up a few days ago. For the week of September 19th, I dug the best track of that week. There was some decent stuff from Big Sean's new album too that I covered on there. But also expect another episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week to drop quite shortly after this review. But also the Kelly Owens album I reviewed. If you have not listened to that or you weren't aware that I covered it, Inner Song was a great album. I would highly recommend it to just anyone to listen to that album. Don't even listen to my review. Listen to that album, but no, listen to the review. So Re-Animator is the name of the album. It was released on September 11th of this year after being delayed a couple weeks because of COVID-19. It was produced by John Congleton, which I found interesting, mainly due to the fact that I was a little critical recently of the work that I heard a little bit on Bully Sugar Egg. But if you care anything I had to say about that, just check out Bully's Sugar Egg album. I thought it was a good album, but also check out that review. But yeah, John Congleton, he is, I guess, a prominent producer that is featured on a lot of indie acts, a lot of the things I guess someone like me would listen to. So it's kind of no surprise he's on this Everything album. And a lot of the things that I guess kind of bothered me in the production on Sugar Egg's album didn't really show up here. So I guess take it with a grain of salt. And also, it looks like Everything released this album semi-independently, working with a label that lets their artists kind of keep control of their work, which I thought is pretty cool. It's always kind of shitty when you hear bands or artists have to go through label drama, and technically them not owning their work is, kind of, to me, it could be a devastating thing in some cases. But anyways, if you're not familiar with the band Everything, they're an English art rock band from Manchester, formed in late 2007. According to Wikipedia, they are an art rock band, but I'd say Everything also has indie and alt rock leaning tendencies that helps them stand out in comparison to many contemporaries. To be, I guess, more frank, if you ever listen to the band Block Party, I guess you could say they incorporate a sense of electronic experimentation similar to how Block Party did on their sound as well. The band has been quite active, with their first album being released in 2010, titled Man Alive, and now in 2020, they are here with their fifth album, Re-Animator, just released now on September 11th. And a few years ago, when I was introduced to Everything, I'd say their sense of experimentation really stuck with me, especially when I first heard the track Kemosabe, sometime in late 2014, I think. The track managed to really stick out in the midst of the mid-2010s indie boom, with its hooky indie pop nature that still managed to incorporate some raw and energetic rock aesthetics. The band has since resonated with me quite a bit, and I'd say their release in 2015, Get to Heaven, was a big reason for that. The hooks on the tracks like Distant Past, Get to Heaven, Regret have been ingrained in my brain quite easily, and till this day I could recite the melodies on command if needed. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. Their last album, A Fever Dream, came out in 2017, and I can remember anticipating that album a bit and even enjoying it when I listened. However, somehow from now and then I can say I haven't really revisited the album much. I'm not exactly sure why. The album really isn't abnormal by Everything standards, and I remain an appreciative listener of the band to this day. And I did go back and listen to this album, and to put it in a nutshell, it definitely has its signature everything sounds with upbeat tempos and energy. The tracks are also quite synthy too, which is a characteristic I like when combined with their brand of indie rock. And I guess I can only really blame myself with neglecting this album until now. And I guess around 2017, I can remember being heavily into like dream pop acts that I was just now discovering, like Porches, and then maybe even overconsumption of the band Tennis too. And by overconsumption, I mean I really overconsumed their music. And then also I got into albums by like From Indian Lakes, another band I discovered around that time. So I can kind of see how everything fell into the wayside. And I guess what I found interesting when coming back to Fever Dream are the moments that kind of allude to what would come on Re-Animator, such as subdued tracks like Put Me Together that sound like the more calmer moments on Re-Animator. I still think after listening to this that everything sounds best when they play to their strengths, like making quirky, well-executed, energetic indie rock that incorporates creative electronic elements that give great foundation for their frontman to go off with his impressive vocal talents and range. I guess the main issue with Fever Dream is that it didn't have enough of that. And I can confidently say Re-Animator reintroduced a lot of what I just stated, which is everything playing to their strengths. And Re-Animator to me feels like a better album. And immediately when putting on the album, we are greeted with the song Lost Powers, a song that features an upbeat and poppy tempo, groovy, prominent, and punchy bass lines with a slightly dirty tone on them. Some bright and jingly guitar riffs, some Tom York-esque vocals with like a shimmering utilization of falsetto, and I'd say that immediately becomes an overarching theme. A lot of this album sounds like Radiohead, especially in the vocals, with it being in such a high falsetto register. A lot of the times, you get immediate, I guess, Tom York vibes, and overall the track has a light and fluffy character here on Lost Powers. There's a nice character change that also happens in the track when the bridge kicks in. It goes into like a more dreamy and ambient style. And then even we get the end that features guitar work with dirty and fuzzy tones sounding very reminiscent of like Radiohead's guitar work, like I'd say Johnny Greenwood, specifically his stuff. The second track, Big Climb, I also found to be a highlight. The track sounds truer to their typical sound. It features a staccato rap singing moment, and that really proves to that. The quirkiness that the band exudes, you find it in this track. And when this happens, there are some nice moments that create anticipation as well in the track. The chorus doesn't quite pay off the way I was expecting, but it's also not bad. The call and response in the chorus I feel is pretty cool too overall, whereas there's a sung melodic line by the frontman followed by a falsetto harmonized gang vocal thing in response. Overall, the track has like a rigid texture too, mainly supported by these rhythmic elements that are on the track. It's not a bad track at all. There's maybe some light industrial Depeche Mode inspiration as well. Next track, it was Monstering. I didn't find to be too much of a highlight. I'd say overall, you do get more of the Tom York-like performance inspiration that's imminent here with those shimmering falsetto moments. There's some more subdued areas in this track with like isolated vocals and bass grooves that are extremely Radiohead influenced as well. Like I feel I'm listening to a track that was meant to be on In Rainbows. And I can see how this could be an issue if a listener is not wanting to hear Radiohead inspiration, especially as blatant as this. It didn't bother me too much, but I can definitely say it's quite obvious when you hear those moments happen. The next track I felt was an improvement. Planets. You're greeted with like an 80s synth ostinato sound that introduces the track, kind of like something you'd expect to hear straight off this Stranger Things soundtrack. The track is quite down tempo. I think it aims to create an overly somber mood. There's some more elements of this track that I guess you could say are quite mechanical and rigid. However, the track does transition to passages that are more loose, light, like in the chorus. There's also some beautiful harmonized vocal lines on this track as well. The bass lines at times are done quite well here as well on the track and are prominent but not overbearing. They follow a lot of the melodic ideas. The bass lines specifically follow a lot of the melodic ideas being created in other voices in the track, so it's pretty cool when you hear that play together. The next track, Moonlight, was quite interesting as well. There's some more bright, jingly guitar utilization here, very bright piano accompaniment as well. Overall, it's a subdued and sensitive track. I like how the drum track plays in the mix very well. All the snare hits you can hear to be performed with like sensitivity with the appropriate dynamics. I think it sounds pretty nice. The track does develop quite interestingly with moments that are meant to like create an emotional catharsis as the frontman belts towards the end with an appropriate soundscape to accomplish just that. So yeah, it's executed well, I guess. Arch Enemy is a track I enjoyed quite a bit. It holds true to the typical anything aesthetics. It's more upbeat and poppy overall. I like the noodly guitar embellishments thrown in and out of the track. The transition from the chorus to the second verse is done quite nicely as well. The track features some syncopated electronic elements that color the track too that I enjoy. The chorus possibly sounds like the most accessible thus far on this album. It sounds almost like radio ready pop chorus like. Later in the track there is like a sense of chaos, and a moody instrumental breakdown is also featured, kind of sounding like the typical Rat-a-tat guitar sound. If you're not familiar with the band Rat-a-tat or the duo Rat-a-tat, it's basically some of their sound shows up on this track. The next track, Lord of the Trapdoor, I found to be a bit of a bipolar sounding track. The track is interesting overall because it sounds like it's in an odd time signature, if I'm correct, 5/4 maybe. So it gives the track like an unsteady and uncomfortable feel. Overall, it's not a bad track. You get like more of those Johnny Greenwood past guitar passage inspiration thrown in here. Didn't really think too much of it other than that. And then the following track, Black Hyena, is probably one of my favorites. The track has a very doomy, dissonant, and ugly flavor to it that just greets you at the beginning of the track. However, the track kind of goes into like this synth pop direction. The instrumental sounds almost Bjork-like with like this heavy synth line that guides the track. The accompanying guitar track on the chorus I liked as well. It gives the track some more melodic texture. Overall, the track does sound more jammy overall and maybe less developed than other tracks on this album. However, it's a pretty moody track. It's not bad, and I'd like to see everything go more in this direction in the future. And then I'd say at this point we get towards the end of the album. This is the part where it gets very hot and cold. So the next track, titled In Birdsong, is a very, I guess, more subdued track with some light auxiliary percussion thrown in. The track does seem to have a bit of an evolution, starting with becoming this light-sounding track with moments that aim to create this growing swell of the same vocal melody sung over and over, with each time adding more textures and volume to the track. Overall, I don't think it achieved the grandiose moment that I was really aiming for, but it wasn't a bad track overall. And then after that track, we get The Actor, which I think was kind of a low point on this album. It certainly wasn't a that bad of a track either, but it suffers from like this rigid and mechanical nature to it. But this time, unlike other parts on the album, I don't think anything else happening in the track saves it from this stagnant personality that it has. And then we are left to the, I guess, closing track, Violet Sun. This track features some 80s sounding aesthetics with angelic synths and like backing vocals thrown in, accompanying this punky drum beat thing going on. And it's almost new wave sounding, or better yet, almost like a Killers inspired kind of track. The production on the track maybe doesn't quite capture the overall energy I was wanting, because I think maybe if I was hearing this track live, I'd be digging it much more. Anyways, I do dig the track for being more upbeat than the previous tracks, but I'm still a fan of the truer sounding anything aesthetics that this track doesn't really have. This track sounds more like it borrowed from other acts, but it's still not bad. And yeah, that's pretty much the gist of the album. By this time, at the end of that track, I guess I really wish it didn't leave off on Violet Sun. I really wish we were, I guess, taken to another direction, but I still can't complain. This album was pretty good overall. I feel like I enjoyed it more than Fever Dream, and getting an anything album in 2020 is a good thing. So I'm feeling around a 7 out of 10 for it, a light 7 out of 10. But I think I enjoyed it on the level of like some albums that I reviewed earlier this year. I think anything fan or listener would appreciate this album. If you're a fan of like some, I guess, UK indie rock, maybe bands like I mentioned earlier, Block Party, maybe Django, stuff like that, you might like this album too. If you're more keen on your indie rock sounding more, I guess, modern, or even like bedroom pop like, or Mac DeMarco like, or something like that, this album might not be for you. But overall, I think that this album features stuff that most rock, or I guess music listeners, could take away appreciating something at least. Anyways, if you stuck around to the end of this review, thanks for listening to the Music Reviewer podcast. And just as a reminder, if you're listening on YouTube, if you enjoyed the podcast or you'd like to hear more, go ahead and like and subscribe. If not, thanks for stopping by. I'm Josh. I'm a music reviewer. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys later.